I said, if we get 500 subscriptions or more, I continue. If we get less than 500, I'm going to refund the money. I don't want to do it. We got 1,200 paid subscribers on the first effort. By the end of the year, we had 7,500.
Welcome back to the Thoughts on Selling podcast. Today, it is my absolute delight and pleasure to have an old friend join me on the podcast. Now, to be clear, he's not old. We've known each other for many, many years. Talked about all things sales and authenticity and a number of other things. Gerhard, welcome aboard. And here's the first question. Who is Gerhard?
Well, that's a question that Lee asks with glee because it's a setup. And the question of who you are is the collective ideas that you have accumulated over the years where you defined yourself. And I think that we all have a challenge defining ourselves and refining ourselves because we look at definitions where we think this is me. And we are correct most of the time, maybe 80% of the time. But many times we don't know who we are. Where we feel when we go on to new territory, we feel strangers because we're not at home. And who we are was when you grow up, then people say, you're cute, and you identify yourself as cute. And then you go to school and you make a mistake and then people say, you're dumb. And that becomes part of your identity.
Formative conversations, as Werner Erhard would point to them, yeah.
And then, I can also give you a 3-part template to look at yourself. When you ask yourself who you are, then the implanted mindset, which is what you inherited from your parents and from your upbringing, that leads to a certain definition where you define yourself in terms of your upbringing. Then the second definition is the imprinted mindset. When you have exposure to teachers and mentors and friends that give you feedback about you. So you triangulate and say, who am I in relationship to Lee? Am I taller? Am I smarter? Am I richer? That's the imprinted mindset. And the third way to look at it is the inspired mindset. What do I want to become when I grow up? What do I want to be? And what do I aspire to? And what are my goals and dreams? And dreams are very powerful. A lot of people don't even know they have them. They are fully awake, but they're driven by dreams. And if you write down your goals, then question them and say, why do I want what I want? Then you can define yourselves in terms of, I want this, and here's why.
Your Honor, I'm going to have to treat this witness as a hostile witness. He refuses to answer the question.
Yes.
The question was, who is Gerhard?
I have no idea. We don't have an idea. We have notions. We can look in a mirror and say, hey, I'm 6'2" and I'm white. I have an Austrian accent. So the definition is we all unfinished business. And to define ourselves and who we are is very elusive.
Yes. So Gerhard, I recently read a book that had been on my shelf for a long time that a coaching client pointed out to me. She said, tell me about this book. And the book is Think Better. So yes. I read the book. Thank you, Alan. Right. And there were two things that jumped out at me. One is the difference between productive thinking, which is original thought, and reproductive thinking, which is incremental improvement on other people's thoughts, and the notion of staying in the question. Gerhard, you are someone that stays in questions in a good way for longer than anyone else that I can imagine. You've been in the question of selling effectiveness since you founded Selling Power magazine in 1981. You've been in the question of selling effectiveness and tribal knowledge since we founded the Sales Enablement Society back in 2016, since you founded the sales conferences back in 2008. You've stayed in that question for many, many years. And some of the people you've interviewed, Aristotle,
yes,
Abraham Lincoln,
right,
Matt Dixon, Lauren Bailey. I throw in the last two because I interviewed Matt's partner, Ted McKenna, recently, and I had Lauren Bailey on my podcast just very recently. I haven't gotten either Aristotle or any of the other Greek thought leaders yet. I'm working on it. Yeah. I want to get Socrates on this. Socratic dialogue is my perspective. And in fact, in your interview with Aristotle, he mentioned Socrates, probably a close personal friend. I don't know how you book those folks. I think their email must block me because they always keep bouncing. You've got a better team on that. So Gerhard, what was your founding experience in sales?
Oh, yeah, I do. Absolutely. And I think it's a great question because we created Selling Power Magazine, we ask people about what was your most memorable sale. And everybody has a story.
Yeah.
Everybody has a different story. I remember sitting in a cafe house in Salzburg where I grew up. And I was part of a group, my friends and I, we were in an amateur theater. And we had a lot of fun and a great conversation. And there was a guy sitting, sipping his coffee, and he looked wealthy. He overheard our conversation, and he was chiming in like people do in Austria. It's gemütlich. And I asked him, what do you do? He says, I'm a salesman. I said, what do you sell? And he says, well, I sell washers and dryers and the household equipment. And I said, how do you sell it? And he said something I'll never forget. He says, I let the customer do the walking. And I thought, I'm curious, what does that mean? He says, well, we're in this next door. There's a hotel there. I rent rooms, meeting rooms, invite people to come in, housewives, their husbands, and I demonstrate the machines. And then I sell to a group of people, and usually 30% of them buy on the spot. And then he shows us a wad of cash that he says, this is what I made today.
Yeah.
And it's 3:00 and I'm having a good day. So I put all those things together. This guy enjoys what he's doing. He's a good actor. He is a human being that has a certain charisma, magic. He makes things happen. He's innovative. His mind is alive and he experiences joy. So fast forward, when I was not involved in sales at this point, I studied accounting and got my college degree in night school. And I learned French and English. And that prepared me for an opportunity that was also serendipitous. I was on a plane to fly to Paris from Munich. And next to me is a guy who speaks French from Belgium. And we had a great conversation. And I said, what do you do? And he says, well, I run this subsidiary of that French construction equipment company. And I said, where? In Salzburg. I said, well, I live in Salzburg too. And so we hit it off and we had the conversation in French. And he says, I'm looking for somebody like you. What do you mean? You speak French, you understand business, you have a good job, but I can offer you a better job. I'm looking for an assistant. And I said, well, why don't we, have a meeting when you get back? And so we did have the meeting. He did an interview. I interviewed some of the other people in the organization. He hired me on the spot, offered me a 50% salary increase of what I had, and I was his right-hand man, his assistant. And he says, work with the sales team and find out what's wrong with them and connect the salespeople with the right people in Paris at their headquarters, because they never get answers from them because they don't speak French and you speak French. So I was sort of the ambassador between their headquarters and the subsidiary.
Wait, hold on, Gerhard. You invented sales enablement in the 70s?
Yes.
Actually, the first known instance of sales enablement comes a bit earlier. Phil Patterson at National Cash Register.
Oh, yeah. John Henry Patterson.
Sorry, right. John Henry Patterson with the National Cash Register Sales Primer. Don't talk about the cash register. Talk about the flow of business. Yeah.
Exactly.
That was the 1870s, if I remember correctly.
No, 1898 was the first sales training session that they did in Dayton, Ohio.
Yep. And so 80 years later, you recreated it. And then a few years after that, I was doing sales enablement. We call it tech support or sales support on terminal-based networks in the 80s at TI, long before, any WYSIWYG stuff. And, we talk about sales enablement today, and it's like everything new is old, everything old is new. So that's fascinating. So you were the conduit, you were the interpreter between the field and headquarters in Paris.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then I had a lot of ideas because I like to improvise. I like to be a matchmaker. I like to connect people. And I said, why don't we invite, instead of bringing the machines, the product to the customer for a demonstration, I said, why don't we invite the customer to the factory, give him a factory tour, show him a little bit of Paris, wine and dine him, and see whether that's making a difference, because bringing a machine to the customer's job site costs money.
Right.
Flying them to Paris is a lot cheaper.
So hold on, Gerhard. So first you create sales enablement. Now you've created the executive briefing center. Well done. IBM is standing by taking down notes, and they'll implement these things. And all the other big tech companies and others have implemented EBCs over the decades. You might have been the first.
Maybe. I don't know.
You didn't Google this and figure out how to do it more effectively, right?
No, Google wasn't invented yet.
And the people that invented Google hadn't been born yet.
And we had a lot of fun doing it, because the first group was like 6 people, get them all on a plane, get them to Paris, organize the hotel, organize the factory tour, introduce. That was sort of a honor for Austrian contractor to meet the president of a company that does $350 million in sales, which probably in today's currency would be maybe over $1 billion. And showing them the factory where they were totally fluid on how those excavators were made, and then set up a demonstration site where they could do hands-on experience and then talk about the experience over a nice dinner in Paris. And I mean, everybody was elated. So we closed, out of those 6, we closed 4. And then we did bigger tours. I mean, the accumulation, it snowballed, because at one point when, they transferred me to the headquarters in Paris, and I lived there, and we came up with the idea to rent a chateau outside of Paris and have on the bottom floor a wonderful buffet. On the second floor, we had wine tasting. And on the third floor, we had executive meetings. And there was also a thing where the biggest contractors, the biggest customers, sort of a title. I don't know how you would translate that, but you became a chevalier du vignoble. It was sort of like a fake sommelier.
I think this is something that Mr. Wonderful refers to on Shark Tank. Chevalier de something, something.
Yeah, that's right. Right. And they were very impressed that they got their name on a document signed by people. But we actually flew in 1,500 people from 30 countries around the world. We chartered a 747 from New York to Paris. It was incredible. And we we entertained everybody, the whole group in Paris. We went to the Lido, the Moulin Rouge, and the Folies Bergère. We rented all 3 establishments for a special presentation for the company.
So you've gone from sales enablement to the executive briefing center. Now you've created the first annual user group.
Exactly. Yeah.
And we thought in the tech world, we created that stuff from scratch. And this was in the 70s?
It is so much fun to work with a company that grows year over year by 40, 50, 80%. And, when there's so much cash, and you match the cash with the ideas, you can do incredible things. And I remember hiring German-speaking actors in Paris to videotape little vignettes that I used to train salespeople.
Yeah, interesting. So let's fast forward a bit. You started Selling Power magazine at about the same time my old boss, Patrick McGovern, started what became IDG.
Right.
What was the vision you had originally for Selling Power magazine?
Wait a minute. Selling Power magazine was not a planned thing. It's not part of any great...
Neither was IDG, was the gray sheet. Where are all the mainframes?
I created an audiovisual training course called The Languages of Selling, and the tagline was Verbal and Nonverbal Selling Power. And I sold it through direct mail, and I was a sales training consultant, and I wanted to have another product, another income stream. And I sold it through an expensive direct mail piece with a 4-color brochure and a postage-paid reply envelope and a colorful order card and an 8-page letter.
Yeah.
And it was, I don't know, thousands of dollars to print out and send and drop in the mail. And then you don't know what comes back and don't know how much inventory I need. And the high school kids put all those kits together. And it worked out all right. But when I looked at the math, the revenue and the cost, the biggest expense was the direct mail piece. And that got me thinking. And I thought, there's got to be a cheaper way. And I had lunch with my graphic designer and I said, can we do something that's a lot cheaper than that? And he was sort of making a flippant comment and he says, yeah, man, the cheapest way to print is newsprint. And I said, you got an idea. And he says, what? Well, why don't we repurpose that direct mail piece and make it a newspaper, like an 8-page newspaper, make it look like the Wall Street Journal, because I like reading the Wall Street Journal. And we have a 2-page ad in the middle, and I give you articles about selling and selling skills. And then we have a coupon on the back that people can tear off and send in. And he says, okay, it's your money. I said, yeah, let's do it. And the new direct mail piece, the newspaper, pulled just as much as the fancy direct mail piece at half the cost.
Right.
What's not to like? But then I got a call. Here's a guy from Liberty Mutual. He's a sales trainer. And he says, I want to buy 100 copies of Personal Selling Power. That was the name at the time.
Yeah.
And I said, what are you going to do with it?
Right.
It's my direct mail piece. He says, I want to give it to my salespeople because the articles are really good. And I want to use it in a sales meeting. I said, okay. And I got more calls. So with the first issue, volume 1, number 1, I sold like 2,000 copies of my direct mail piece. Then I went to volume 1, number 2, and I added a coupon, and the coupon said, if you want to buy extra copies, it's 99 cents a copy. You need to buy at least 5. And I have group prices. And I sold 3,000 copies. And then came the stroke of genius conversation with my wife. And she said, Gerhard, do you have another income stream? And I said, what? Subscriptions. I said, then I have to commit to publish this all the time?
And your bookkeeping brain said, wait a minute, a subscription is not an asset, it's a liability.
Exactly. So I said, okay, help me design an ad. So she designed an ad that says, I buy anything from someone with selling power. There's something corny.
Yeah.
It was really silly. But to make a long story short, I said, if we get 500 subscriptions, or more, I continue. If we get less than 500, I'm going to refund the money. I don't want to do it. We got 1,200 paid subscribers on the first effort. By the end of the year, we had 7,500. And then the beautiful thing happened that more than 80% renewed the next year. And then I started group subscription sales. Then I repackaged the editorial and took the 12 best cover story interviews we have done at the time. Like we had Mary Kay, Dr. Dennis Waitley, and Zig Ziglar, and Dr. Wayne Dyer. So I created a book called Super Achievers and sold it, but we also, sold it in quantity, but we also gave it as a premium for a 3-year subscription. So revenues started to come in, money, came flowing in from those different streams. And pretty soon I had $1 million in the bank and no debt.
Yeah.
And I thought, how did that happen? And then we got clients like Salesforce.com. I remember traveling to San Francisco, seeing Mark Benioff, and he, started an advertising campaign. And I remember he had the back cover for the whole year. And somebody saw the back cover from General Motors, called them, and closed an $82.5 million deal. So that legitimized.
Mark was happy.
Yeah, Mark was happy, and he booked the back cover for 5 years. And then when they went public, he invited me to the New York Stock Exchange to ring the bell. There was a big deal. We still communicate, and he is speaking at our last event, and he said he will speak at our next event in December as well.
Oh, good. Mark and I are sharing the stage? That's awesome.
Yeah.
So, Gerhard, I want to throw something out.
If you don't need it anymore, please do.
Oof. So, Selling Power started as a business for you.
Yeah.
Right? You had some expertise at the ground level, right, in the field of making stuff happen. And you took that expertise, you sliding doors, opportunity, you found that opportunity, you built it into something. At some point, my hypothesis is that your perspective shifted from this is a business to this is an opportunity for Gerhard to curate the development of the industry. I've seen you in action many, many times. You play full out. You're 100% authentic. We've talked about authenticity many times. You, again, I don't want to put words in your mouth, and here they are. You firmly believe that things can be done differently and better, and you want to help drive that. Is that a true statement?
I think it's a very fair assessment. Fundamentally, I believe that everything we do can be improved, can be done better. I also try to get my ego out of the way, that I'm not the authority, but I'm the broker of ideas between the solution providers and the problem owners. And sales is a problem owner. The sales manager is, the salesperson is. And what I've discovered in the process, that there are different levels of brilliance in this world. I remember the first time I got exposed in Salzburg in this amateur theater group. I met a lot of directors and met a lot of actors. We invited them to talk to us and mentor us, and we were soaking it up. And there was one guy who came to the Salzburg festivals. He was an assistant to Ingmar Bergman, one of the most famous directors in Europe. And he was teaching us methodologies and processes for directing people that I've never heard before, that has not been captured in books. And I thought that was brilliant. And by implementing those ideas, we became rock stars. We competed with, in an amateur theater festival, 38 troops from all over Europe. And we were number one. This little gang from Salzburg. And we were on German television. So I used some of that process, that idea that we can learn from the highest level of brilliant people because they're all accessible in the United States. All talk to you. In Europe, it's more difficult to get access to that level.
Right.
But when you study the ultra peak performers and take their advice, your life improves. There's no question about it. And there's always something new, Like today I was thinking about, we talk about health and life. We have a health span and we have a lifespan.
Right.
And here's somebody who comes up with the idea with a joy span. How much joy can you import in your life, and how can you discover the secret of joy, which is actually comes more or less from bringing joy to others? So I found a lot of meaning in going to the Mark Benioffs and the Mary Kays and the Zig Ziglars and, Jay Leno or Malcolm Forbes, or I interviewed Donald Trump in New York, and I was invited to a sales president club meeting in Miami where Bill Clinton, I was the luncheon speaker, and Bill Clinton happened to be the dinner speaker. And in the afternoon, we played golf together with the CEO. So I got exposure to a lot of really bright people. And I thought, I want to soak this all in and share it with everybody because, what am I going to do with all this advice?
At the beginning of this year, you interviewed Abraham Lincoln, if I remember correctly.
Yes, yeah. I went into a time machine. It was not cheap. With ChatGPT, you can get all the answers.
So wait a minute, Gerhard, it was not cheap, but it was sponsored. You ran ads on it. So
No, I didn't.
It wasn't out of pocket for you.
No. This is not a for-profit. It was just satisfying my curiosity. Can I pull it off?
Got it. So it was your personal time travel, not business.
Right.
Got it. So you curate all this conversation. And again, I'm going to put words in your mouth because I do that sometimes. All of these conversations create perspective on you on the difference between what is and what should be, or what you see as the possibility. And then you use your platforms to facilitate that change. You bring people from different backgrounds, different walks of life, different sets of experiences to come together in that town hall format, whether it's virtual or live at a conference, and share that tribal knowledge back and forth.
Right.
What have been a couple of your most satisfying wins from that perspective? Where have you seen your initial germs of ideas come to fruition in either new processes or new technologies?
Well, I think that you see through other people's eyes and other people's stories where I get a strong sense that the work has had impact. I give you just two stories. One was at a David Sandler meeting in Baltimore, and there was a guy who walked up to me and he says, "Thank you for saving my life." And I said, "Do we know each other?"
Right.
And he says, "No, you don't know me, but I know you and I know your work." And I said, "Tell me your story. I'd like to hear more." And he says he had some financial setbacks. He actually got depressed and had a plan to kill himself. And on that day where he had that idea, Selling Power came on his desk, and he was reading a story, and it happened to be, he remembered the cover was blue, and I remember what we put all the power of positive thinking schools together into one edition and looked at from the Dr. Norman Vincent Peale perspective and Dr. Marty Seligman, and put all this together, all the bright ideas about what the benefits are and what the techniques are that you can apply to your thinking process. And he says, I never considered changing my thinking, and never considered where do my thoughts come from? How can I think differently? And just by being offered a choice to think differently about my situation empowered me to say this idea is ridiculous. And he says, here I am. I'm one of the top performers at Sandler Training. And the other story was more recent where Todd Duncan, he's a very well-known sales speaker. He gets like $25,000, $30,000 for his speech. And he addresses audiences, 2,000, 3,000, 5,000 people at a time. He's doing work all over the world. And he told me that he was reading Selling Power at a time where he felt like he was drifting. And he learned how to set goals in a more disciplined way than not just write down your goals, but be very specific. So he took that advice from Selling Power, and he says, I still have a laminated 3x5 card that I kept for the past 25 years. And he says, every one of those goals I wrote down at that time, I've realized. And one of the goals was to have a house overlooking the Pacific Ocean with a tennis court and the car he wanted to drive and the family he wanted to have. And he says, I checked off everything because I was clear about my goals from that moment on. I was no longer drifting, and I was clear about the why. And as you know, the bigger the why, the bigger the try, the easier the how.
Say that again, Gerhard.
The bigger the why,
Yeah.
the bigger the try.
Yeah. The bigger the why, the more effort you're going to put into getting to it. And then what was the third part?
The easier the how.
The easier the how.
Because it's no longer an effort. You accomplish your goals, you advance in the direction of your dreams without the burden that comes from not knowing why you're doing it.
Yeah, it's the difference between a limiting mindset and a growth mindset. I just posted this on LinkedIn. A limiting mindset is, I lost the deal, I must suck, right?
Yes.
A growth mindset is, they chose not to go with me, I wonder what I can learn from that. And that's the difference between okay salespeople or not okay salespeople and good salespeople or great salespeople. It all boils down to mindset. You know, when you interviewed Aristotle, he gave you 3 keys to sales success: ethos, pathos, and logos. And logos at first is like new logos versus growing existing logos. No, that's not what he meant. So the ethos was questions rather than answers. And by the way, Socrates gave him that one. The other 2, I think, are his. Pathos, the close connection between emotions and actions, which is all about authenticity, right? It's all about authenticity. And logos, the Greek logos, is appeal to logic and reason. So it's both the emotion and the logic. And Ted and Matt would agree. Logic is okay, but you have to appeal to someone's perception of risk. It all comes back, right?
Yeah, we can learn a lot from the Greeks.
Yeah. So looking forward, Gerhard, what do you want to take on next? What needs and I'm not talking about like new businesses, that kind of stuff, but in the area of sales performance, sales excellence, what do you think needs your attention next? What do you intend to bring a curated focus on so that can be fixed?
I think the biggest threat and the biggest opportunity is AI. And we had now 3 AI sales summits, virtual. I usually bring in people from Deloitte and McKinsey and maybe Forrester. And I experienced a personal struggle as well with AI being sort of a guide, an assistant, but also AI can be damaging where it dumbs down your thinking. And if you're not critical, you almost need to put AI through a dog training. Your prompts are like dog commands, sit and attack. And if the commands are not right, you end up with garbage or with something that bites you.
From my perspective, the biggest benefit of AI is, and I'm not thinking about the replacement of salespeople by agents, and that's happening, right? I'm talking with a guy that has a service that it'll take incoming sales calls completely without people, and 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. If you're motivated at 3 o'clock in the morning to buy something, his AI will answer the phone for a small business. I'm not talking about that. I'm perfectly happy with my Roomba doing my carpet and my Luba doing my yard, right? I've got a robotic mower. I don't want my computer answering my phone for me. On the other hand, AI can be used to maximum benefit, help a salesperson be better prepared for a conversation. Also, that's the biggest risk, because if the salesperson outsources the critical thinking, they're toast.
Yeah.
I use this example.
Very embarrassing, because if you ask, the typical prompt is, I'm making a call on XYZ company, give me the 3 headwinds and the 3 tailwinds. the company is experiencing. And then AI gives you the answer for another company.
That happened to me. I got a call from an inside sales guy who said, I have some thoughts around how you can do X. And I said, really, tell me a little bit about my company. And he did. And the good news was he did a great job, right? He'd actually done the research and internalized it. Shay, I'm talking to you. He had done the research and he internalized it. And he was ready for that pivot. I said to him, the good news is you did a good job. The bad news is bad data. And so I said to him, I like your style. I like how you pivoted. For as long as you want, I will coach you. And we've been coaching together pro bono because I like him. You see these rising stars every now and then. Shay, I'm still talking about you. You see these rising stars coming up, right? He's only been in sales for a year, even less than a year. It's like, I want to give that person a boost.
That's so cool. Yeah.
And we talk every 2 weeks. So my perspective is that happens. And even if you've done that work beforehand and like you feed the right prompts in and you get the right information out and you're going to meet the VP of marketing on the third floor, you get on the elevator and the CEO walks onto the elevator and hits 12. What are you going to do? You're going to pull out your phone and go, can I reconfigure this? Right? No, you've got 30 seconds to say hi to the CEO and say something useful. If you haven't internalized it, if you haven't been curious and really internalized it and only focused on the task at hand, it's a miss. It's a complete miss. And conversely, if you've done that work, that opportunity, as you described, sitting on an airplane next to someone who offered you a job that changed your life like that.
And I feel totally okay once you step in the flow and you recognize where that river might be ending up, in what ocean that you feel comfortable with, go for it. Somebody once said that when you grow up, the best advice for parents is your children need roots and they need wings. And then you need to let them go and they create their own roots and their own wings. And if you are too rigid and give them roots that can't be transplanted, then you're going to have very disappointed faces, not just on your children's faces, but on yours as well.
Welcome back to Thoughts on Parenting. Today, we're going to have Gerhard talk with us about parenting because I know I've met several of your children, Gerhard, that you have done a fabulous job.
Oh, thank you.
Both your girls worked at one point at Selling Power, is that correct?
Yeah, I know, two of them, Lisa and Larissa.
Larissa, yep.
Right.
And you did a fine job. I always enjoyed working with them back in the day when we were doing stuff together. And leaving Thoughts on Parenting and coming back to Thoughts on Sales, it is our one life, Gerhard. And some people have different masks that they put on at work and at home and with parenting. And I have a feeling that one, you don't have a mask at all. And two, you're the same person in every circumstance.
Yeah, and I think it has to do with learning how to accept yourself, because the reason people wear masks is they're strangers to themselves. Because in essence, the relationship you have with yourself is the blueprint for the relationship with other people. So if you try to fake yourself out and live with a fake interior, you're going to live with a fake exterior, and people can spot a fake a mile away.
So this reminds me of a question that the head of nursing at a major regional hospital asked one of my coaching clients. He said to him, they were out at dinner. They weren't talking business really, so to speak. They were at a conference and they were out to dinner. And the head of nursing said to my coaching client, who works for a big tech company, tell me about you.
Okay, good.
And they spent the next hour sharing personal information back and forth. And in the debrief the following week, I asked my coaching client, why do you think the head of nursing at this hospital asked that question about you? And he goes, I think he just wanted to know about me. I said, yeah. He wants to know if he can trust you because he's going to be at minimum a coach and at best, because he's not an economic buyer, he's a stakeholder, right? He wants to have smart screens on all the walls. He wants to have better patient outcomes, but he's not a buyer. I said, he wants to know if he can trust you. He wants to know if he promotes you internally to people that can make product and services buying decisions. Are you someone trustworthy? He wants to get your essence because he's talking about multi-million-dollar purchases, which are dwarfed by potential outcomes of better patient outcomes or better because this person has 4,500 nurses under him, the care of his team. And so it's all about authenticity and purpose. We talked about purpose and whether he shared his personal purpose. And it was a deep dive into a trust conversation. And he's got a friend there now that will serve him both as a friend and as a potential business contact for a long time.
That reminds me of a visit I did with a salesperson with ATL, and it's a radiology company, technology company. I called them and I said, I want to do a report of a salesperson selling in Paris with the top salesperson in the country. And I flew to Paris and went with him. He actually drove a Porsche, and we visited like 3 hospitals. The first call we made, he's the director of radiology. He has about 12 doctors under him. And I asked the doctor, what do you like about the salesperson? Why do you trust him? And he says, because he tells me the truth. And he tells me the warts. He tells me the potential problems we're going to have with this equipment.
Right.
And I said, doctor, and I'm fluent in French, so I'm translating in my mind. I said, it sounds like a marriage. And he says, no, monsieur, better than a marriage, because you have to tell the truth all the time.
Yeah. We did research on buyer personalities at IDC years ago, and multiple C-level executives said when they heard the truth, especially when a salesperson, an enterprise salesperson would say, this isn't really the best fit for what I have to offer. I would suggest that you talk with this company, another company, and I can give you the name of some people to talk to. C-level executives would say, if a salesperson ever said anything in that ballpark, they would follow them to the ends of the earth. They would say, I don't care where they went. I don't care what they were selling. I would call them first. And it's part of the authenticity, right? If you're authentic with people, the individual transaction is not important. It's important to sales managers and all that. It's not important in the life of the salesperson, because the salesperson only takes 2 things with them as they move from job to job: their reputation and their Rolodex. And if their reputation isn't really good, their Rolodex is useless.
Right. It's all about the right connections.
Yeah. There's a book I just read called The Third Door.
Oh.
It's written by a 20-year-old who was trying to become something in business. And it's an interesting read, and it's an even more fun listen. It's a very enthusiastic 20-year-old telling his story. So he's very enthusiastic. The idea of the third door is, it's not who you know. It's not even who knows you. It's what they're saying about you. If you are authentic and you touch people so that they know who you are and what you're up to, and you guide them to shape what they're saying about you, that gets you far. It's the same thing as the internal champion. You don't ask your internal champion to go off and say something without coaching them on what to say. It's an interesting book. I highly recommend it. It's a quick listen and informative.
I like the idea a lot, because reputation is a reflection of your character, but reputation is not something that you make. That's something others create for you.
That's right. Gerhard, this has been fabulous. Any closing thoughts?
What's the weather in Boston this weekend? It's
always gorgeous. Well, so one, I'm not in Boston. I'm on Cape Cod.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Right.
And much to my wife's chagrin, I say there's no such thing as bad weather. There's only bad clothing choices.
That's actually an Austrian proverb. There's no such thing as bad weather, only inadequate clothing.
Inadequate, yes. So what's that in the original language?
In the original language, there's schlechtes Wetter existiert nicht. I'm too much stuck here in English. Es ist eine Frage der Bekleidung.
I'll have to run that by my best friend's wife. She's also from Austria.
Oh, that's cool.
So yes, it's always gorgeous here. It's 60 to 50 degrees right now. The sky's clear. Probably similar weather to Fairfax, right?
I'm in Fredericksburg, yeah, in the high 50s.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, I love where you are. That's such a magical place for me, because my wife and I, when we got married, we spent the honeymoon on Cape Cod. And I remember we rented a house and we went to the beach. And I built sort of out of the wood, driftwood, I built a little hut in a little shade. And then we went out fishing. And the first fish I ever caught in the United States was a 4-foot sand shark.
Not a good eating fish.
No, I did not know what it was at first.
Right.
I thought, oh, it's a big fish. It's a lot of play. And then I landed it in the boat and she said, get it out of here.
Let's go to Whole Foods and go to the fishmonger there and we'll get a nice piece of tuna.
No, you live in a wonderful part of the world.
Yeah, by choice, by choice.
So my closing thought is that people should eat more lobster from the Cape.
Welcome to Thoughts on Seafood. This is a wide-ranging conversation.
So I have 2 questions. One is, who are you?
Oh, Gerhard. I am a person, I'm a father and a husband and a vehicle for transformation.
Oh, that's a good answer. And the other question is, what was your most memorable sale ever?
My most memorable sale ever was a partnership between a tiny little startup providing services to mobile workers and an OEM deal with what was digital multi-vendor customer services, where this tiny little internet startup caused digital to completely change its business practices so they could play on the internet. And I remember sitting with my counterpart at Digital and signing the contracts. We took photos of it, and it was my biggest deal ever from the perspective of impact. I've had bigger deals financially. I've signed multi-million-dollar deals, closed multi-million-dollar deals, big contracts with big impact, like working with the head of Microsoft sales excellence on improving their sales effectiveness.
Wow.
Those kinds of things, right? Those, you get used to that kind of stuff, right? Those are memorable. They're not as memorable as the ones that really stand out. This was a David and Goliath. And I'm still friends with the sales rep from Digital, who she's
Wow.
long gone from Digital, obviously, but
Very cool.
yeah. How about you?
Well, I remember one sale where I was in the conference room of a New York publishing company, and there were 6 vice presidents, and they wanted to buy Selling Power. And they grilled me for about an hour, and then they served lunch, and they had a button in the middle of the conference table that when they pushed it, the waiter came and brought refreshed the drinks. And they offered me $10.5 million for Selling Power magazine, and I decided not to sell it.
A wise move.
And they said, before you leave, is there anything we can do for you? Anything you need? And I said, I'd like to take that button with me and install it in my office in Fredericksburg.
Right, right. So there are also some memorable ones, the ones that got away. My favorite non-deal was with Jim Robinson III. If I remember, he was a director of American Express.
Oh, yeah.
He had something to do with Coca-Cola, and then he became a venture capitalist at JRR Ventures. His son now, I think, leads it, the fourth. Same business that I was talking about before. I got a call from his executive assistant. My partner and I were driving around in Connecticut, and she says, Jim, I had been building a relationship with her because I knew she was the source of all things good getting to Jim. It made some sense for him to be an investor in our business because he had some similar investments. She calls me up and she goes, I've got a spot about 45 minutes this afternoon with Jim. Do you have time to get into Manhattan? It's like, yes. So we get there and she seats us in his anteroom. And it's gorgeous. It's all finely hewn wood and, all sorts of figurines and stuff. And we start looking around and there's a picture of him with his arm around Ronald Reagan and, just dozens of artifacts and things like that. And I look at my partner and he looks at me and goes, what the hell are we doing here? We know what we're doing here, but what the hell are we doing here? And Jim, he's passed away since, so this is a bit sad, but he eventually walks in, a Southern gentleman. He makes a little bit of small talk, hi, how are you, etc. And then he asks that same question in a very Southern, gentlemanly sort of way. What the hell are you doing here? But he didn't say it at all that, because here I am, my partner was still a Brit. And I were sitting there, we're chatting about technology stuff, and we kind of came to him out of the blue. I don't think he'd ever seen a prospectus or anything, presentation from us. We just appeared in his anteroom. And we then spent like an hour talking about the opportunity. I shouldn't tell this story out loud. At one point, he left us in his office, and my partner went around to the other side of his desk and set Jim's homepage to our website.
Wow.
So we never got the deal. I don't think it was because of that, but that was my favorite non-sale.
That is so cool. Yeah. Being in that rarefied atmosphere, there are certain places in New York that are just magical, like the New York Stock Exchange or even the New York Public Library. It's an impressive building. Or I remember having dinner at Windows of the World before it disappeared.
Gerhard, it's been an absolute pleasure.
Likewise. Thank you for your questions. Thank you for your patience. Thank you for your time. And thank you for your curiosity.
And thank you likewise. We've worked together on and off for many years, and you are one of the ongoing pillars in the sales community, curating what's best in sales. Thank you for taking that stand. I know you stand for authenticity and the ongoing questioning of how can we be better? How can we do better? How can we be better?
I want to do better, and I want everybody else around me to do better.
Yeah. It's not a matter of how much more money to be made. It's how can we do right by our customers?
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Gerhard.
Thank you, Lee.
Always a pleasure. Another deep dive into the topic of sales excellence and the performance mindset. If you found this conversation interesting, I would appreciate it if you would share the podcast with a coworker or two. And to explore this topic in more depth, send me a note via the contact form on podcast.thoughtsonselling.com or find some time for us to talk at meet.acellergroup.com. Thanks.